There's a new minimalist white sneaker in town. Well, new-ish anyway. Oliver Cabell, this company here that makes the Low 1 sneaker, they were founded in 2018, and the whole idea with the company is they want to be more honest than the bigger brands out there. Like, the big conceit is that the big companies out there, they won't tell you how much their markups are. Oliver Cabell actually does. Like, there's an interesting breakdown on their site where on their products they'll tell you how much all the materials and the taxes and everything cost them, so you know how much profit they're making. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in the price section of this video. But the brand's most popular shoe, the most popular sneaker at least, and I'm pretty certain the most popular product overall, is the Low 1 sneaker, which is squarely taking aim at the kings of the minimalist white sneakers out there, namely Common Projects and Koyo. So throughout this video, I'm going to be comparing this shoe to the Common Projects Achilles Low a little bit here and there. I've been wearing this shoe for a good few weeks now. I really broke them in. You can see the leather has got some nice creases along it. It's not fresh out of the box, but I got some good experience with it. I'm going to tell you all about the pros and cons. So as you can see, the Low 1 from Oliver Cabell is a very minimalist, low profile, simple sort of sneaker, and that's the draw with this sort of aesthetic. As I mentioned, Common Projects, their Achilles Low sneaker really started the kind of gold rush for this particular type of aesthetic, which many companies out there have been trying to duplicate. Well, not duplicate, but be inspired by, they would probably tell you. So Oliver Cabell has this, also there's the Koyo sneaker, there's the sneaker from Taft, Beckett Simonon as well. There are many companies out there that have really been inspired by that original brand. Now, Common Projects though is more than twice the cost of the Oliver Cabell Low 1 sneaker. But the main things you want to know about if you're comparing this shoe with Common Projects is that the Low 1 uses calfskin leather, whereas Common Projects is nappa leather. It's a little bit softer. It's a tiny difference, but it is noticeable. Besides that, this has 7 pairs of eyelets, whereas the Common Projects has 6 pairs of eyelets, and the last is different. The fit is different. That's like probably the most important difference here. Many people complain that the Common Project sneaker is very slim, very streamlined, very sleek, which of course makes it very sexy, but it's a very narrow fit. Whereas the Low 1, it's still pretty narrow, but it has a bit more room around the toe box. It's not like a Stan Smith from Adidas, which is like quite a lot more bulbous. It's sort of like a compromise between the two in that regard. So there's more room in the toes here, and it's not as hard to find a fit that works for you. Those are the main differences. There are a few others, like the tongue is a bit thicker and the footbed's a little bit softer on Common Projects. Also, of course, the logo on the back is different, but those are largely the ones you want to know about. Otherwise, it's practically the exact same shoe. They're even both made in Italy's La Marche region. Oliver Cabell's used to be made in Spain, if you've read that, but they've since moved production to La Marche. They both have the precise same outsole, a Margam rubber outsole. I'm gonna get into the reasons why that is a very coveted and desired sort of sole for high quality sneakers later on in the sole section of this video section. It's also both fully leather lined as well. They both have some suede on the inside of the heel to help to prevent heel slippage. They both got a nice soft footbed. They're both bright white and look very minimalist. And they've also both got stitched construction. So there's a bit of glue in there as well, but the upper is stitched to the footbed. There are a lot of reasons why that's important, which I'm gonna get into a bit later on, but the big one for me is the fact that this makes it more durable, and it means it's less likely to get holes in the glue in the construction at stress points. Like for example, around the toe break, I've got a pair of Chuck Taylor shoes where around the toe break, very quickly, like within weeks sometimes, if not months of getting the shoes, you're gonna get holes around the stress points there. That doesn't happen with stitch construction, and it does help to confer some durability to this shoe. So long story short, it's a very handsome, low profile, well-designed sneaker that works with just about every single outfit out there, from board shorts to dressy jeans. So that's the overview. That's my main comparison between Oliver Cabell and Common Projects. But for those of you who want to geek out a little bit more and get really in depth and get your fingers dirty with the construction and the materials, well, you've come to the right place. Let's take a close look at this leather. All right, so this is calfskin, which Oliver Cabell uses primarily due to its softness, its fine grain, and its durability. The durability might surprise you because calves are very young, but it actually has more tensile strength than steer hide. And like they say, it has a finer grain, which basically means it looks a bit less like skin than leather from grown-up cows. And it's less rigid as well because the hide is smaller and the grain is tighter. And because of that, calfskin usually costs more, which is one reason why dress boots cost more than like rugged boots. because like the feel is nice and buttery and soft and everything, and it looks like less sort of rugged and outdoorsy. But yeah, it's more expensive. The softness is also attributable to the fact that it's chrome tanned, which produces softer leather than vegetable tanned leather. All leather for sneakers is chrome tanned, except for 1 or 2 exceptions like Canvas Scheme. And the leather is about 1.3 millimeters thick, so 3 ounces. It's full grain, which here it really just means it's made from the outside of the animal's skin. And Oliver Cabell tells me they researched over 70 tanneries before landing on one of Italy's La Marche region tanneries that has been making leather since 1954, although the actual name of the tannery is a secret. Just in case you wanted to steal their leather secrets, you can't. But the tannery has won a bunch of awards for ethical and environmental production. Even though chrome tanning is really bad for the environment, but apparently this place has won awards. I think a lot of it is because they work with a lot of small farms, they can track their hides, and Oliver Cabell worked with them for about a year to develop this particular leather here. All right, so for taking care of this leather, you want to regularly spot clean it. I just use Cobbler's Choice Leather Spot Cleaner myself. It's kind of just what I've got lying around, but it works well. It's the one that I use, but I'm sure other products are going to work well as well. You also want to regularly just bang the soles together like that to dislodge some extra dirt that's lying around. And you want to just give it a wipe down with a wet rag now and then to get rid of some stains. But eventually you're probably going to want to give them a nice deep clean. So for that, Oliver Cabell has their own product, a deep shoe cleaner that you can just buy off their site if you want. And with that, you get that, you put it on a wet like horsehair brush or any sort of brush, then you work it into a lather and you sort of like clean the shoes like that. That's after you've taken the laces out though. And when you take the laces out, what they want you to do is to take the laces out and then soak it in some detergent and then put it inside a garment bag and then wash it with a hot white wash in your washing machine. Now, could you just take the laces out and just throw them in the washing machine without having to go through all those extra steps? Yeah, you probably can. I'm sure it'll be fine. But, you know, maybe get some stain cleaner or something like that. Oh, also after a while, they're probably going to get like some scuffs and scrapes where you lose a little bit of the white. When that happens, don't panic. You can just get some white shoe cream. Kelly's is a pretty cheap option that I've seen around that seems to do the job. Sophia has a quite a bit more expensive option, but also Oliver Cabell sells their own shoe cream, their own white shoe cream for that as well. So if you want, you can just get it from them when you're buying the shoe cleaner if you go down that route. Also, another thing about these shoes, when we're talking about taking care of them, you do want to make sure you're using shoe trees in these. So this is a cedar shoe tree. And the thing with shoe trees is you put these in boots as well, right? And it might seem a bit ridiculous to put a shoe tree in a sneaker because the point of shoe trees is to help boots and dress shoes retain their shape over time. It also helps to prevent or at least minimize leather wrinkling and creasing. And it also helps to extend the longevity of the shoe because the cedar helps to sort of suck in moisture. So that means that if you're using shoe trees regularly, then the shoe and the stitching and stuff is less likely to kind of rot and fall apart. So what you want to do is, you want to put your shoes in shoe trees and let them rest at least a day between wearing. That'll suck up all your gross foot stink and everything else. They're gonna smell better as well. All right, let's talk about this sole. Sorry it's a bit dirty. I have been wearing these around because, I don't suck at reviewing. I do actually wear stuff before I review them. So the outsole, this is a Margam sole. Margam it's called, which is a very famous sole for sneakers that Oliver Cabell actually resisted going with for some time, even a year ago on Reddit. They said, we will not be using Margam for the low one for a variety of reasons. They said it was too heavy and not as abrasion resistant, among other things. But I guess they eventually went with it, just like Come On Projects, just like Koyo, just like a lot of these sorts of companies, they go with the Margam outsole. Margam is really just beloved for their quality and their product consistency. It's pretty resistant to splitting. This product uses a cup sole as well, which is so named because it sort of cups the upper. Here's a picture you can check out. And that also gives them more room to put the removable footbed, which is covered in leather and made from a proprietary combination of foam and recycled rubber. There it is. And these compress less than 5% over time. And they have an open cell technology to allow breathability. They said 95% breathability. Underneath the footbed, you can also see nails smashed into the sole, which are used to further secure the midsole materials. Cup soles are a pricier form of sneaker construction when compared to a vulcanized rubber sole, which doesn't provide as much support. You don't often see vulcanized rubber like the one on the Converse Chuck Taylor on leather sneakers because it's usually attached with heat, which can mess with the leather a bit. As you can see, it's stitched onto the upper, which is very cool. Most sneakers are glued on. This is stitched and glued a little bit on as well. But do not be fooled, this does not mean you can resole it, unfortunately. I mean, you might be able to find aftermarket Margam outsoles, like they don't sell their soles to anyone. You could take them to a repair shop, but it's still a gamble. The leather probably wouldn't make it through the process. I mean, it's a sneaker. Like, don't get carried away, it's not a boot. The big upside of the stitching isn't that you can resole the shoe, but rather that, well, for starters, it's friendlier on the leather than the heat gluing. Like, it lets the leather stretch and mold to your foot a bit as you wear them in. And it means you don't get holes on the stress points like the toe break, as I was saying earlier, which has happened to all of my Chuck Taylor shoes. The stitching is good, not perfect though, I should say. You can see on like the right sneaker, there's like a little tuft on the end of a thread coming out that isn't flush against the shoe. You get that little on the inside of the shoe in some places as well. The stitching also isn't very consistent on the sole as it could be. Like if you take a look at the stitch density, it varies a little bit. Like it's like shorter in some bits and other bits. But this is the kind of thing that some people will complain about. They'll complain about it if they're wearing like $700 boots, but for sneakers under 200 bucks, it's just like, to me, it's just a reminder that it's hand stitched, that people aren't perfect. I have difficulty really getting upset over that. I mean, like, come on, it doesn't really matter that much, let's be honest. As for the fit and sizing, they do not have half sizes, but they do say if you're between sizes, if you have a medium or wide width foot, mine's medium, then you should size up. So I'm an 11.5 on a Brannock device, like the shoe measuring device in the shoe shop, and I got a 12, and they fit fine. As I mentioned earlier, the fit is not quite as narrow as the Common Project sneaker. That does produce a shoe that is ever so slightly less dressy than like the very sleek, like very slim, very sort of European, you might say, look of the Common Projects. That said, yeah, like it still looks very sexy. It's still a good looking shoe. It's still very sleek and streamlined. And the fact that it has just a tiny bit more room around the forefoot means that it is, I mean, there's more room for your toes, right? I mean, I think the biggest complaint I hear out there about Common Projects is that those sneakers, they're just so sleek that a lot of people find their toes get like a bit bunched. If you're like even slightly on the wider side of normal, Common Projects, they're often like, people don't consider them very wearable. In this instance, the Oliver Cabell shoe, yeah, you get more room around the forefoot. So it's just like friendlier to a wider variety of foot shapes is what I'll say. So that's definitely an upside for this particular shoe. Otherwise, the footbed it's not quite as soft. When we're talking about comfort, it's not quite as soft as Common Projects, but it doesn't compress as much over time, which is like kind of cool as well. The outsole is very hard for a sneaker. Like it's not the sort of like really squishy sort of outsole you might expect with like Allbirds, for instance, or some other sneakers out there. So some consider that like a bit of a downside when it comes to comfort, but with the hardness, you get a bit more stability. You're a bit less likely to just kind of roll your ankle walking around, which I've done on Allbirds like more than once. And also the footbed there works fine as well. So even though the outsole is pretty hard, it nonetheless confers durability, and the footbed here does help to absorb plenty of shock. So yeah, very happy with the comfort. Now, as far as the price goes, these shoes used to be $250-ish, but they've since dropped the price, and they now cost about $188 for a pair of these. The price can always change, but nonetheless, that is less than half the price of Common Project, so it's just a massive upside. It's also a lot cheaper than a lot of other entries in the minimalist sneaker genre, like Koyo sneakers, for instance, which are $250, $260, for example. So yeah, so the price is good. Relatively speaking, for this particular type of shoe, it is a good price. And another thing that's pretty cool about Oliver Cabell, as I mentioned in the introduction, is that they will tell you on the site exactly how much each component of the shoe costs. What you wind up with is a shoe that to them costs like $88, I think, something like that. Which, you know, of course, they're making $100 on that, but nonetheless, if that seems egregious to you, then you are not familiar with the typical profit margins of like really big companies out there, which is like typically like thousands and thousands of % in profit. So I'm not too fussed about that. They're making $100 on a pair of shoes because these shoes are pretty good quality shoes, you know? So it's not cheap relative to Converse Chuck Taylors, if that's what you're used to buying in the world of sneakers. But in this kind of realm of, you know, Italian-made, handmade, stitched, calfskin leather, this sort of Margam sole, Italian fancy sort of sneaker game, they are very well priced in this realm. All right, so why should you consider getting a pair of low one shoes from Oliver Cabell? Look, relative to Common Projects, they are much better value, way better value. In fact, better value than like the majority of shoes out there that fall into this genre, like Koyo, even like Taft has one that's about the same price right now, they do anyway. And a lot of other companies, they have tried their hand at this sort of shoe, and they never get cheaper than this, at least as far as I've seen. You know, I've got more work to do, but it is very good value for this type of shoe. And while we were comparing it to common projects, the fit's a lot nicer, it's a lot friendlier on more foot types. You get a bit more room in the forefoot. Not so much that it's bulbous, it's subtle, but it does just make it like it's easier to get a pair of these and not worry so much about the fit, if that makes sense. And also the footbed does not compress as much over time, which some people are gonna like. Besides that, they're just cool looking shoes. I mean, you've seen this sort of shoe before, or you've seen it now. Really, really ultra minimalist, very, very sleek, very, very cool, very simple, very attractive, very handsome. I can kind of keep on going on like this, but versatility is the name of the game with the minimalist white sneaker. And these shoes, they feel really nice. They get nice quality leather. They're handmade in Italy, so you know that you're kind of wearing something of good quality when you're wearing it. And it also goes with just about every outfit out there. So for that, I've got to really hand it to them. Now there are some potential downsides with this shoe. For starters, not everyone's okay with calfskin leather. Some have ethics problems with it. That's just you, that's an individual thing, but not everyone likes that. There are some minor QC things. I already mentioned this in the sole section. If you just skipped ahead to now, the stitch density varies a bit with the stitching in a stitch construction. Like some places it's more dense than other places. On the inside of this shoe, there are a couple of threads that are not flush with the rest of the shoe. This is the sort of thing that you only really see if you're really desperately trying to find things to complain about. And if you have bought some $700 boots, like a lot of people do, then yeah, there are valid complaints to make. It's a sneaker though, like let's not go nuts. Like it's not a big deal. This stuff is not a big deal. If you're paying $400, $500, yeah, I can see you not wanting anything that might even suggest that it was not utterly perfect from start to finish. But again, it's a sneaker. No one's gonna notice this kind of stuff. I think that stuff is fine, really. Like, let's be realistic. Also, speaking of minor things, you do have the nails sort of coming up underneath the footbed. You don't feel them at all, just some people don't find them very pretty. And also it makes them a bit less airport friendly. If you've got nails in your shoe, that means that you might have the metal detectors. That's a tiny, tiny thing, and it's underneath the footbed as well, so it's not like anyone's gonna see it. But the stitch density isn't a big deal. The nails are not a big deal. Some people also think that the shoes are squeaky. Like I've seen some online reviews where people say there's a total deal breaker that this shoe is squeaky when you first get it.
But the squeaking is a deal breaker.
I think they've just sort of changed the shoe since then. I think that was from when they were made in Spain. They're made in Italy now. They were not squeaky when I first got them. And even if they are squeaky, then that goes away after a couple weeks of wearing them. So I wouldn't worry about that either if that's you. And if you want to know if this shoe is capital B better than Common Projects, look, the only differences between these shoes is that Common Projects is a little bit softer in the leather and the tongue and the footbed. Now, those things are still very, very soft with this pair of shoes. I will admit that it is a little bit less like walking on a cloud than Common Project sneakers, which I think is actual words I use in my review because it's quite cloud-like. This is a bit less cloud-like, but it's still very, very soft. It's still very, very high quality sneaker. It's made in the same region of Italy, after all, the exact same outsole, same stitch construction. It really is an extraordinarily similar shoe, and it's like over $200 cheaper. So I'm not gonna say it's an identical experience, but am I happy to recommend these people if they want a minimalist white sneaker and they don't want to pay for Common Projects? Yes. Am I happy to recommend them if they do want to pay for Common Projects? Yeah. Yeah, man. It's not exactly the same, but it's a very good shoe, and I'm happy to kind of sign off on it. It's a good shoe. All right, those are my thoughts on the Low 1 from Oliver Cabell. It's a good shoe. It's a fine shoe. It's a good entry in the minimalist shoe genre. Honestly, if they were like precisely the same price as Common Project, if they were sitting next to each other, I might lean in the direction of Common Projects just because it's like a little bit softer and everything. But the fact that they are over $200 less expensive, I think makes them a better shoe. You know, the cost is much more justifiable. I'm a massive cheapskate, so I'm a big fan of these shoes. The full written review with a bunch of photos and everything else is in the description below. If you want to check that out, go to my site, click around, click on some ads, give me some money, please. New York rent, it's very expensive. And make sure you subscribe as well, because I got a lot more shoe reviews, boot reviews, denim reviews, and other kinds of stuff coming up.